Okay.
Hello. We're back. Live from beautiful, not downtown Zeist. All right. It's the Dick and Martin show. Martin made a point of not being in the camera, but he's sitting right here. Trust me. I couldn't do it without him. Let me try one thing here first myself. And then we will start. Record. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excel and data. I have this friend who's a major, thinks he's a real data scientist type, and he's in his 70s. And he made a big thing to me to say that the word is data, not data. If you don't want to sound
echo,
well, fix it. Hello. Goodbye. Who's echoing? Am I still echoing? But anyway, you said data in English, not data.
Your output.
It's not. I mean, it is muted. There. Yep.
We have an echo.
We have an echo. Hello, echo. Echo. On. No. Sound.
Still have an echo.
Output. Internal speakers muted. They're gone.
Yeah.
What if I mute? Oh. That kind of echo. There. All right. Spooky. How are we now? We still echoing? This is being live broadcast, so
This must be it.
fix it. So anyway,
We're done.
we're done. Echo gone. Yay, Martin. I asked the last class, and actually there are quite a few different guys, so I drove the other guys away, I guess. I guess they figured they know Excel, so it's not important. I know some of you who you've already told me who you are. Who are you? What do you do? What's your relationship to Excel? There you go. You're perfect. Right. I like that. All right. So I understand your relation to Excel. You? Yeah. For who? Who do you work for? What kind of thing do you work for? As a small company or multiple small companies? Oh, yeah. What?
You have to go to the, and you need to mute your microphone.
Great. How's that? Is it good? Much better. We're back from Zeist. Good. So you do report for other people and using Excel for a lot of it. You, sir? Right. And now? Yeah. Well, that's what you're in the right spot. You, I know you guys. You. And you want to do less simple reporting. Okay, good. And you?
Building a database in Access.
In Access? Well, that's funny. I'm one of the world's biggest fans of Access. Access is absolutely a great tool, gets no respect. It is the red-headed stepchild of Microsoft, which ironically I am a red-headed stepchild. How weird is that? But anyway, I have news for you on Access. they have announced that, in their inimitable way, not really announced, but sort of that the Access client is alive again. They've come out with connectors, so you can, for example, connect Access to Salesforce data. Now, nobody's doing it now, therefore that's for new development. So they're actually coming out with stuff so you can use Access client for new development, and they're actually encouraging that when everybody was under the impression that they were killing Access client. Well, they're not. Second of all, they've added Access now to another layer of Office 365, which suddenly makes millions of people now have access available to them as their license for Office 365 who didn't before. And that's not going backwards. This is for real. Which means people who have existing applications in Access don't have to, oh my God, what am I going to do, right? Because everybody thought Access was dying. Well, Access isn't dying. Access is still alive. Access client. Because finally they realized this is a really good product. A lot of people really rely on it. Oh, but it's not cool. Well, who cares? I don't care. I'm not cool, right? You know, but Access works. And Access, you can't kill it. It's like a zombie technology. You cannot kill it. I guess unless you shoot it in the head. And that, I don't know. But it kept coming. And finally, I think Microsoft might have realized that. So that's good news. But we're not going to talk about Access at all today. Okay. Now, story of spreadsheets and data. This is really important to understand, guys. The first spreadsheet that had a sort of thought about data at all and tables was Lotus 1-2-3. And the 1-2-3 was spreadsheet was 1, graphics is 2, and database is 3. Hence the name Lotus 1-2-3. And apparently there was a huge argument in the Lotus Development Corporation before they shipped. A whole bunch of people didn't want the data capabilities in it. They thought it was over people's heads. Dumb. Because the data functionality of Lotus was a game changer for Lotus. You know, I'm sure still remember going /data query, input, criteria, output, right? Right? This burned into my fingers, right? All these Lotus commands to do database capabilities. So the irony is that in the 80s, I also got into connecting to external database sources in Lotus 1-2-3. There were add-ins, so I could bring in data from DBase and from Informix SQL data straight into Excel. I was doing this in the 80s, right? And building applications. I had a great one where I did an application that used an Informix backend for a company. After 15 years, they called me and said, "Oh, Dick, we're moving to a new computer. Can you come and move your program over?" I said, "You mean you're actually still using the program?" 15 years without calling me. I did too good a job, right? I should have put some bugs in so that they had to call me, right? But that was Lotus. So then in the 90s, when Excel came out, Excel had database functionality. It inherited some of the stuff from Lotus and it had its own capabilities. But then in the late 90s, they started to really up the game, right? So with Excel 5, they came out with pivot tables, right? And then with Excel 97 or 95 and 97, they came out with lists and tables and list objects if you're talking about VBA. And then they added all these connectors to then so that your table can actually have a direct connection, which we're going to look at today, and pull data in directly from a data source right into your spreadsheet and be refreshable. Some of the stuff I'm going to show you today has been in Excel for 20 years, and I'll bet there are people in this room who are going to go, wow, I wish I'd known that 20 years ago, right? Because again, Microsoft's got a problem with their messaging. They don't know how to message Excel. I don't understand that. I've never understand it. I probably never will. So then in 2010, they built this thing called Power Pivot. How many of you use Power Pivot? How many even know Power Pivot exists? Wow. Okay. Well, at least some of you. Well, your eyes, it's called, as to what Power Pivot is. It's an add-in that allows you to bring in huge amounts, if you want, of external data. But regardless of the size of the data you bring in, it allows you to bring in data from multiple sources, create relationships like you would in a database itself inside Excel, add value in the form of DAX functions, bring it down into a pivot table that amounts to a pivot table on steroids. And it is just awesome. And it has a compression capability that you can bring in 100 million records into an Excel file. Why you would, I don't know. But some people do that. And I'm going to show you how not to do that, because that's stupid. But there's other things you can do. But it is very, very powerful. And then in 2013, they came up with a new product that was a sort of like Power Pivot, but not. It was from another group. So they were, again, the typical internal Microsoft, competing with each other. What do they call it? There's something about, like they're saying that Trump should bring in people with different opinions. And so they have this creative tension, right? So all he does is bring in billionaires who don't have any creative tension, but that creative tension in Microsoft is sometimes gets in the way. So Power Query comes in, and it has other capabilities, and it sort of gets along with Power Pivot, but then it also does a bunch of stuff that Power Pivot does. But it's great. And then they renamed that in 2015 to Get and Transform, which is a really dumb idea, when they included in Excel. So in Excel 2016, Power Query has become Get and Transform, and it's actually baked into Excel. And then in 2015, Power BI suddenly started to become the big thing. And Power BI and Excel have a long history together, right? Sort of like an old girlfriend, right? They have a history together. They have a child together. What is that? The child is Power BI Desktop. There you go. Hey, that analogy works, right? Came up with a great one last night when we were having dinner. We're talking about big data and all that stuff. And I realized that I'm like the guy who pushes the broom behind the elephant. That's what I am, And that's what we are as Excel people. We don't have the big data. But I thought it's an out of context, but it is a funny image, right? Anyway, whatever. Because what we've had with Excel is I call the copy and paste conundrum, where Excel's strength was always its biggest weakness. You could copy and paste data into Excel from other sources, but you had to play with it and change it, and you had to physically know how to do that. Therefore, you couldn't give it to somebody who doesn't know anything about Excel and have them do it, right? You can't rely on them. Plus, and this is another big problem, is if you say, are getting data from some source, like an Excel file every Monday that accounting sends you. And it's got to be a certain number of columns with the same headings all the time in order for it to be brought into Excel. How many of you have that? And once every 6 weeks, they screw it up, right? They add an extra column, or they delete a column because somebody's on vacation and the other guy just does it quickly. And it breaks all the time, right? Well, what we're talking about here is the ability to actually go right to the source, pull it in. You're not going to have that breakage. I have an application I wrote 13 years ago where that exact same thing happens, where they get data from their CAD office in an email, they save it down, and then they push a button and it imports it into an Access application. And literally every 8 weeks or so, I get a call from my wife who uses this program. It doesn't work. So I have to get the file and clean it up and send it back to her. But that's my greatest accomplishment in my entire life. I have a program I wrote 14 years ago that my wife uses every day. Think about that. Talk about, wow. That's my greatest pride. And she hasn't killed me yet. I mean, she's killed me for other reasons, but not for that. Get value out of data then means planning, coordination, and discipline. It's too easy to quickly pull together and analyze it once. Plan the data flow so you can repeat it over. There's too much reliance on VLOOKUPs and dangerous formulae. Like, I'm a big fan of formulas. I've done some serious formulas in my time, right? And they have their place. But when you see this kind of stuff, you're going to see that a lot of these formulas are going to be out the window. And it's time consuming. It's error prone. And fundamentally, it's risky. I've done many solutions which used to take a senior manager a day and a half every week to do, replaced with a button you push, and within 10 seconds, they've got the result that used to take a day and a half. Haven't we all seen that kind of thing? Well, that's what this is designed to do. So I'm going to talk about 3 ways to get data into Excel, but each has sort of a subset, but there's fundamentally 3 ways. One is native Excel connections, which are baked in, that have been in Excel for 20 years and have gradually improved over time. The other one is Power Pivot that I talked about, and the other one is Power Query and Get and Transform. Like so many things Microsoft, and because I spent all my time, sorry Martin, all my time in Microsoft, I can't really speak for other companies. They will build a technology, and partly they have to add the new technology on top and keep the old stuff for backwards compatibility, because it would break everything. And then they add more on top of that. The problem is, in recent years, they've been going all kinds of different directions with that. So, like I said, the logic of going from one to the other isn't all that obvious. And you'll see that here. But it's one of these things, the more you use it, the better you get at it. First step, tables, list objects. The simplest way to deal with data in Excel that is valuable in a surprising number of places is to just take a table of data and create a list object out of it. You convert it to a table, you can add records, you can auto format. I'll show it all to you right now. Let's open, and we're going to open. By the way, I'm using Excel 2016 for all of this. I tend to not use Excel 2016 because a lot of my clients don't have 2016. I'm actually looking at one client, big bank, that has Excel 2010 still as their standard, which is a bit tough. I thought you saw me open this. Oh, come on. Oh, go away. Go away. Go away. Come on. Thank you. It's like you talk to it like a dog, it responds, right? By the way, last night it was nice. Went for dinner at the Old London. I love this. While this is loading. And there's a pug at the next table to me, sitting with his leash, sitting there. You know, a pug dog. I thought, that's so cool. I love that. In North America, that ain't happening. We have dog apartheid, I call it, right? The dogs live in their world, and that's it, right? They get walked, they go back to their world. I love it here. That's one of the things I love about it. I like lots of things about Holland, but that's intelligent. But anyway, you don't care. I understand. But I had to fill the time while Excel was loading. Receivables data.xls. Okay. Come on. Come on. Thank you. There it is, receivables data.xls. How many of you received a file with data that looks like this? Come on. It's because it's big, I guess. It's coming. There it is. I think what it is I'm downloading it from a SharePoint site rather than from my local store. This is a 1,500 row database. It's not a normalized database. It's really a traditional Excel style file where you have different headings for each value, and we're going to use this table, and I'm going to show you how to clean up this table. But it's an idea of how this works. Let's do something here. Why is it's not responding as quickly as I'd like? Maybe because there's too much happening. That would be disappointing. Okay, here we go. That, okay. Table. Convert to range. Thank you. Home. Clear formats. Format. Date. Mat cells. Date. Done. All right, so I've received this file, which is a simple, straightforward set of information. It's got rows at the top, and it's 1,500 rows long of data. This is what you usually get you copy and paste into Excel. What they added a few years ago was the ability to turn this into what is known as a data table. So what you do, if you say insert table, come on, insert. Boy, it's getting, I'm afraid everything that I'm trying to do on this machine is starting to catch up with it. Insert table. Now again, this is one of these things that's not intuitive, but once you've done it a few times, it's the first thing I do when I get data like this. I don't even think about it. You notice how it says automatically it's picked up the area that I'm in, which is non-contiguous, like is contiguous set of data. There's no blank rows, no blank columns. It picks up everything. And the important thing is it assumes my table has headers. It doesn't always assume that because you might have more than one field with the same text in it. And so you want to clean that up before you deal with this because every first row has to be unique. When I go OK, it creates a table and it formats this area so it looks like this with this nice offsetting alternative. This is now a table, and you see at the top it says table 1. If I go up here, I can rename this, and I'm going to, got to get out of that cell. I'm going to change the name of this to table data. Go away. Yeah, my computer is not responding as I would like. It didn't really have any problem in the last session, but for some reason today it is. So I named this range table data. Now, table data, it doesn't look any different, but there's some seriously interesting differences here. If I go down to the bottom here, right now, if I'm on table data and I say resize table, it says it goes to row 1534. So if I go to row 1534 and I add new data, now you can use things like data validation to control the garbage in, garbage out to make sure that the user, like me, right, doesn't type the wrong data in. You can apply this. And the cool thing is that everything you do, this new row, you notice how it's now got a row, a line around it? All the formats from the row above now have come down. So when I go in to type in a date, it was already formatted in row 1535 when the table only went down to 1534. When I go like this now, my table has actually expanded to include 1535, whereas before it was only to 1534. So one of the real risks is the old thing about adding data to a table and not resizing it, right? We've all played that game, especially back in the old Lotus days. This automatically increases the size of it. Of course, if you delete rows, it's automatically going to shrink it. That's inherent anyway. But you can go and you can go right mouse, delete rows, table rows, and it will delete the rows in the table. But if you have something to the right in columns that are not in the table, it won't delete them. You know what I mean? It's deleting the table rows, not the entire row of the spreadsheet. So there's another thing. You can add records at the bottom. You can manage your stuff within the table itself in terms of deleting rows, etc. Now, what else can you do with it? And this is just a simple table. I'm going to go here and say equals, let's do it this way. Let's just say, I'm going to say I want to take the current. Look what happens as I go equals. As I move across, you can see in the formula bar it's changing. It's picking up the name of the field in the table rather than the cell reference. And if I see that, it will return the value of the currency field in that row. That's why it says at cur. This is called a structured reference. And the nice thing about that is it's self-documenting, right? And it's just a nice way to look at a formula rather than a cell reference. So if I go equals cur times 10 or something, for whatever reason I would do that, it will take the value in the currency column times 10. Or if I can say the sum of currency to over 120, yeah, I typed it wrong. Let's do this again. Equals sum of this range here, and hit enter. It's the sum of currency to over 120. You can say, well, what's the point? Well, once you've worked with this, it's a hell of a lot easier. But here's the cool thing about this, is not only the fact that it's documented. When I typed it at the top, it automatically filled down that column all the way down the table. If I come and write a new row, it automatically added those formulas at the end in the new row without me having to copy them across. This is the simplest positive thing that they've added to Excel. Nobody appreciates what this does and how important this is, because it's too obviously simple, but it's huge. It's huge, right? And you can refer to these tables in all kinds of interesting ways. Because it's got a named range, you can go and insert, you can say, I want to make a pivot table off of this. And it says the range is table data, right? So now whatever I do here, if I go client, current, right? This data is coming off of this table, which if I add new information to it or delete information or add new columns, becomes available to my pivot table, either in the data changes or I have new columns, new fields in my pivot table. It's really awesome, these data tables. And the first thing I do when I get data into Excel, I bring it in. But this is just the beginning. Let's go back to our presentation here. And we're going to run late into lunch, by the way, boys, because we started late, right? Hope you guys aren't hungry. Nobody can leave, all right? Pardon?
Why did it happen?
Yeah, I don't know. Why did we start late? Oh, that could be part of it. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Sorry about that. Oh, well, he was an asshole anyway. Whoop. Did I say that on a live broadcast? Uh-oh, we're in trouble. Now, the alternative is external tables. Let's look at that. Let's go, this database, remember that data that I originally, let's save this data, this file. An alternative now, if I close this, is to create a new file. Instead of copying and pasting, what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to go, come on. Interesting how this is slow. It was fine for a long time. Now it's slow again. File, new, file. Come on, new. Boom. You go to the data tab. You can get external data. You can do it this way by going external data or from a file. I'm going to go from a workbook. And again, Office 2016, the interface, the menu is different than it is on let's try this again here. Get external data. Oh, yeah, okay, from workbook. And let's see where I hid that. This is documents, okay. Dropbox. Respond. What is it doing? I don't want you to do that. All right, Dropbox. File. Oh, let's try this again. Come on. My computer is acting up. I haven't had that happen in a long time. New query from file from workbook. There we go. Dropbox. SDN. Na, 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 na. Okay. Now, when I pull this up, it's establishing a connection to an Excel file. It could be a connection to an Access database. It could be a connection to a SQL Server database. But in this case, it's connected to an Excel file. When it finally comes up here, it's saying these are the objects inside this file. And it found that table I created called table database. And there's the data listed from table database. I can then say, I want to load this into my file. And what it does is it brings it in and shows it in my database. And there's the same exact data imported, 1,534 records, imported into, this is the original file, imported into my spreadsheet. And this is exactly the same as before, but I don't have to copy and paste it, right? If I delete this section, what happened to that banana time thing, Martin? Do you still do that?
3 p.m.
Oh, it's at 3 p.m. Okay. All right. I'll remember that at 3 p.m. If I delete all these records in there and I go right mouse refresh, and then refresh, it will bring my data directly in. There it is. It's replaced it. So what it's done is this table now is not copied and pasted in. It's actually a link to that file. Therefore, if that file changes and I refresh it, this file will reflect that change. It'll reflect that change in that spot. So this is a native Excel capability that 99.9% of Excel people don't realize that you can do. And so if you have data out there in an Access database, you can really easily connect to it by going to a connector and bringing it in. And in an Access database, I'm going to focus on you. If you have a query, you can actually connect to that query as well. And so that query transforms the data in some way. Maybe it's an aggregate query. Maybe it's concatenates a bunch of things together. You can use that query as if it's a table and bring the query result directly into your Excel file for use. Therefore, no more copy and paste. No more relying on somebody to send you the file because you're going straight at the data source. Now, this is useful if you're responsible for the data source. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, if you're responsible for the data source, then you can do that. But if you have to rely on somebody else's data source, that could be a problem. But if you can get access to that data, then you're off to the races. I actually did at UPC here, actually, I can tell you this. Here, I was sitting with a director, and my boss needed data from his group. And the guy said, I can't give you that data because your boss will use it against me. Right? And so that becomes a problem sometimes when you can't get the data you want. But if you can get the data, boop, here it is, right? It's perfect. Now, what's our next trick? Let's go to the next trick. Native Excel data into the data model. Okay, another trick then, now, let's create a new file. File, come on, close. File, close. Let me give up on this. Let me go back to Excel 2013. I think that may be what's causing some of this problem. I'm not making a negative comment about Excel 2016, but maybe it's a little heavier in its demands. So let's try 2013.
Might be the Wi-Fi connection.
Entirely could be that. Come on, 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 come on. So what we've done is we've taken a table and we've converted it to a table. We've created an external link to a table. So let's look at the next trick. Our next trick then is to go data from other sources. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm going to actually connect to that Excel data by using the access connection. Now, this is kind of odd. If you use the access driver, you can connect to an Excel file, just as if it's an access table. And in fact, if you inherently use the Excel capability in 2016 to connect to an Excel table, it will use the access driver because the access driver is always there. So what you do is you go in here and you say, okay, I want to all files. Come on, all files. And I'm going to go to Dropbox, SDN 2016. Okay, and I'm looking for receivables 2 again. Now this is telling me here's my table, which is table database. If I go like this, it gives me this dialog box, which is subtly different. And this is also available in 2016, but it seems to be going faster. If I click OK on this, it'll bring it into a table, which is the first thing I did. If I can make it go straight into a pivot table. So if you've got a pivot table, I can actually use never bring the raw data into Excel officially. I just go straight into a pivot table. That's just the results of that. It goes into a cache up in the background in Excel, but it's not visible to Excel. But this is the thing that's interesting. See this, add this data to the data model. I'm going to bring this in, and you're not going to see it in Excel, but it's going to be in Excel, and it's going to be available to Excel in amazing ways. So I'm going to say add it to the data model and only create a data connection. When I go OK, it's going to look like nothing's happened, but it's not true. What it's done is it's sucks the data, is the best way of putting it, from the data source, which in this case is an Excel file, but could be an Access table, could be SQL, whatever. It's not there. There's nothing there. Nothing up my sleeve, right? The reason is it is up in Power Pivot, which is an add-in, one of those two add-ins that I talked about. If I go Power Pivot Manage, you will see the result of that query up in Power Pivot. It takes a few seconds, and up it comes eventually into my screen. Now, the reason we're running into this is because we're doing, this computer's doing multiple things at the same time. Now, this menu, you see in the bottom, it says Table Database. It's rendering that database. Here is the data that's loaded into the PowerPoint window. It's not in the spreadsheet, but it's in the file. What it does is, I assume it's at the bottom of the XML of the file, because that's how it's stored internally, is all this data is added to the bottom of the file in a segment that is reserved for data that's in Power Pivot. And because of the way it stores that data, it can store very large amounts of data in a very compact way, right? And that's pretty amazing. If you're only bringing in 1,500 records, it doesn't matter really. But you can bring in 100,000, 1 million, 2 million, 10 million. You can bring them into an Excel file, because you know how Excel has a 1 million row limit? Well, you don't need that anymore because it's up here in this. And if I go, I can have multiple tables across the bottom here, and I can add them to the data model. And when I'm in here, I can actually go into a diagram view, and I can make relationships between these, just like I showed you in Power BI Desktop, to create a true relationship for what amounts to OLAP capability. So what you've got is a lot of the capability of SQL Server analysis services is actually built into Excel. And that same capability is now built into Power BI Desktop. Now there's people who say, well, with Power BI Desktop, I don't need Excel anymore. That's crap. That's not true, right? But that's what they say, right? A person can say what they want. But if I want to go insert pivot table, My choices now include not just ranges. I can go here and I can select that data set and use it as my source for my pivot table. Therefore, if I have a huge amount of data, I can create a pivot table that is based on that huge amount of data. So if I go client and I go total, there's my pivot table. So the data is not in the spreadsheet. The data is up in what is known as the data model. So let's go to the next stage with this. Let's go to the next stage with this. Fourth step is actually using Power Pivot to bring the data in. Now, you'll notice when we're in Excel here, we're in Power Pivot, in the Power Pivot interface. I can bring data in from a database, from a data service, from other sources, while I'm in Power Pivot itself. And a lot of people do that. And it actually has capabilities that are beyond regular Excel in terms of the kind of data you can connect to. However, in the world I live in, my data sources are always either Excel files, Access files, or SQL Server files, or SQL Azure files. I don't want to play in that other space. People can go do whatever they want over there, right? The reason I say that is that if you import it into Power Pivot using Power Pivot's capabilities, you limit what you can do with that data once you've already brought it in. So for example, if I look at the connection that I have created here, I can edit this connection in Excel. I'm going to go an extra 15 minutes. All in favor? 15 minutes? You all right with that? Yeah? Okay. Martin, can you go out and get us dinner? Lunch? Thank you. I can edit this to say, select star from, and then what I do is I always put square brackets around table databases. And then when I run this, it'll be exactly the same result. So if I go Power Pivot, it's still thinking. All right, fine. Come on. If I go to Power Pivot, calculate, manage. Oh, it's in the middle of an action that blocks. It's thinking. Sorry, right? Let's try it again. It should be okay now. There it is. This is the same result as a result of a SQL statement. Now, what the cool thing about that is, if I'm going to get rid of this page completely here, because I don't need it. One thing that people don't quite realize, if I go in here, well, let's look at this Power Pivot. Office Woodbury. You notice how there's 1,500 records, and they're Guelph, Woodbury, London, whatever. I live in London. I can go here, and you're not going to believe this one because it's pretty subtle. I can go in here, and I can say, edit this query connection property, where office is equal to London.
Double F.
Yeah, I probably got, I got to edit it, make sure it's clean. Boom. Now, what may happen here is that I think when you're connecting to Excel, it's, I think it's, okay, yeah, whatever. It's case sensitive. Oh, Office. All right, fine. Let's try it again here. Data, connections. Edit connection. Where Office equals, oh, London. Let's try double quotes. Yes, it's working now. So what's happening is I'm actually creating a SQL statement that now will refresh this data, only bringing in the data that I want for Office equals London. So what people will do is set up multiple queries for the different offices that they have in their business. And every time it refreshes, let's cancel that. Every time it refreshes, it will come up with only the data for that office. So if I go up into manage, you see it's all London, right? Because I changed my data, my SQL string. If you created this in Power Pivot, you couldn't create the SQL string and you can't say where this is equal to that. The result is exactly the same in terms of the data, but Power Pivot's own native connection doesn't have the ability for you to do that kind of thing. Now, 99.9% of people don't give a crap, right? Because they're, oh, I just want this, right? But in the real world, this is incredibly powerful. And I'm going to work towards how this should work. If I have this query here now, and I go into this connection, and I say, take this and copy it into the spreadsheet as a cell. Come on. There we go. Paste. Thank you. And I'm going to call this text SQL. I'm going to name this cell when it finally accepts what I'm typing. Text SQL. So this cell is called text SQL. And I'm going to say where office equals Barry instead. So of course I could copy this to the clipboard and manually go and edit this connection to say office equals Barry by going in here. But this is where it gets interesting. If I go to my VBA, I can say, how many of you have done VBA? Right, okay. I'm going to insert a module. I'm going to say sub quick. Okay, so I go this workbook dot connections, and I only have one connection in here. Dot ole db connection dot commands text equals, and I could go like this, and I could actually paste this in. I'd have to change these to single quotes. I can paste that in, and what it would do is, if I run this, it would actually reset that connection, assuming I do it correctly. Why is it? Okay, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Done. So it's actually changed the connection so that if I come up here and I refresh this, it should now say Barry. It's calculating. It comes up with only a few records. Done. And when it refreshes the screen, my hope is that it will say Barry, which is a city. Come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Don't make a liar out of me. There, you see? Barry. So what I've done is I've created some code which says, now change the connection string. It's pretty simple code, actually, isn't it? Change the connection string to say select star equals Barry. But you know, I'm going to change this slightly. By the way, if you guys reach out to me, I can give you the code for this. I can help you till the cows come home on this. I'm going to say, take the value of range text SQL and use it as the connection for this. So if I go back to my spreadsheet here, remember I named this text SQL? Come here, come on, come on, come on. Come on, there you go. Wow. There we go. Text SQL. If I change this to say London, then I run that code, it'll switch it back. But watch this. I'm going to go London. I'm going to type it. Okay. And I'm going to say, I'm going to change this to say equals, quotes, select where office equals, single quotes, and whatever value is in this cell, and single quote. So now this says where office is London. Let's try Woodbridge. So now you see how this changes because it's a formula. So every time I type a new value in there, so now all I do is go developer, macro, and I put a button on here that runs that macro, and it's run. Now what it's done is it's changed the command text, which means that connections command string has changed. But what I really want, what am I missing here, David? The connection. So if I go into my code, very good, you go to the head of the class, and I go, and I'm going to change this slightly. Ah, Edwin's hungry. That's fine. This is my favorite construct in VB, the with statement. It allows me to make a nice, organized piece of code that are related to each other. So saying, with this connection, change the connection strings, command text to that, and then refresh the sucker, right? So now if I run that, now I'm going to do another thing here. I'm going to go to insert a button. And this is a classic button, a native Excel button. It ain't an ActiveX button, it's just a button, right? And I push this button, and it runs that code, and it changes the sequence to Woodbridge. And now if I go back to Power Pivot, it says Woodbridge. Yeah, you see? It says Woodbridge, right? As the office. So what I've done is I've created an insanely simple way to allow the user to say, well, actually, I don't want Woodbridge. I actually want Windsor. Right? Now, let's look at this first of all. Let's go to the next step. Insert, pivot table, use this. Now, I make it look easy because I've done this 1,000,000 times, right? Okay, I know that's a fact, right? Okay, so this is the Office's clients. So if I go here and change this to Windsor, and then I push my little button, that's all the clients for Windsor. If I type London and push this little button, that's all the clients for London. It takes seconds. And I can build a slicer that lets you pick from a list, and all the user has to do is click who they want, and there's the result, and it's done. And the secret, you can do this in native Excel, but the real secret is to use it in Power Pivot. What? Time's up?
What is a slicer?
Oh, you would ask that, wouldn't you? A slicer. I'm just trying to think of how to show a slicer in this context. Let's see if I can create a slicer here. A slicer is a really cool thing. If I go slicer, I can say office, okay? Now in this case, the slicer is a list of everything, right? So if I say I were to change this, you would ask this, wouldn't you? Right, good point. Say I had to change this to just say select star from database. And then I run my button. This slicer will now have a list of all the offices. All right, so it's picking up the offices, and I could then, with a little bit of effort, if I had a little more time, tie this in so that the user can actually click on this button here called a slicer, and it would drive this macro or drive the value in this cell, which would drive this code, which would then loop back around and make me come out here. If I can build something that my customer, my client doesn't need to know anything or do anything, and it's connecting directly to that external database, not copying and pasting, nothing. Think about this. This is a single-click solution for a real user to produce what they want. Now, in my next session, I'm going to do the same thing here, better than this, and I'm going to then use it to publish to Power BI as well, so that the user can push a button and it takes the data from this external source, which is actually in the cloud, pulls it into their spreadsheet, does the analysis, and then pushes it up to SharePoint, and then that goes up into Power BI. And the user just has to click one button. And it works over and over and over and over and over and over again, as long as they don't move the data source or change the data source's fields, which is hard to believe that they would do that, but it has been known to happen. But then you can fix it. You just change the query, right? And the other thing about what I'm going to show you is you can cookie cutter it over and over. You can use the same process on files, any kind of data source, anywhere you want. And you use it all behind the firewall inside your company. But you know, because we've run out of time, there's another thing. And actually, you'll see it this afternoon. So you got to come this afternoon. There's another capability called Power Query, which has the same ability to bring in data from all kinds of other sources, including Azure, including Postgres, Teradata. It produces data, can suck in data from all over the place into your Excel file, where you can then create these solutions. And the user then doesn't have to know anything. In fact, the less they know, the better, right? Because, you know, the old little knowledge is dangerous. In a spreadsheet, it's really dangerous, right? And the other thing is, there's not a formula in sight. Well, the only formula is this, right? Here's an interesting trick. And then I'll let you go for lunch, you poor souls. Let me, by the way, if I run this again now, watch what happens. There it says London. This will all change, including the list of offices will change. What I always do, now it's just London. What I will always do is I will take this and put it on another sheet, so it doesn't get in the way, right? So this looks nice. I'll format it. So that I can go, if I drive this, say I change this to Windsor again. In a perfect world, then the interface is all there and it works perfectly. But the sexy math is on, see now it says Windsor, is on this sheet here. I always create a sheet or multiple sheets like this, and then what do you do with them? Anybody but David? Hide them, right. You hide the frickin' sheets is the way I would put it. And you know that there is a VBA code called Excel Very Hidden? How many of you knew about that? Right. Excel Very Hidden cannot be unhidden without doing it in code. You can't, through the interface, unhide it, which means the user has to really know what they're doing. They have to be really trying to screw things up, right? And so if you ever find somebody does that, you go to their boss and you get them fired, right? Especially if if it's important to the business that this thing work, right? There is, or you can also add password and all that. You can make it so they can't get in there, right? This is a whole mindset of how to develop Excel that I've developed over the last 20 years. And I have all kinds of examples of how this works, and nobody cares, right? I mean, the people who I do work for love me, but you have trouble explaining it to other people. You know, I could save you infinite numbers of hours with a little bit of effort. Oh no, we're too busy, don't have time, don't have money, you know, that kind of stuff. I think you've all been there. So is this a teaser? Did that work as a teaser? Did I get you thinking, right? How many of you were copying and pasting? Come on, raise your hands, right? You know, You mean now you're not? After this session, or just in general? So you have been doing this kind of stuff. Good. But you're obviously an advanced user, right? Because this way you can produce something that is flexible, efficient, repeatable, reliable, robust, blah, 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 I call them all the ables. And that's it. Let's eat lunch.